Hi, I'm Isolde. 12 hours before I was supposed to walk across a stage in my cap and gown, my father left a note on the kitchen counter. No conversation, no eye contact, just 7 words scribbled in pen. Graduation's canceled. Expect court papers. I didn't cry. I packed my bag in silence. But here's the part no one expected. When I opened my records, my name was already gone. My thesis, replaced. My voice, rewritten. My photo, swapped for my sister's. My place in this family, erased, before I ever had a chance to claim it. What kind of father stages a legal ambush against his own daughter the day before her graduation? And what kind of family calls that love? You want to hear what happened in the 12 hours that followed? I was supposed to pick up my gown. That was the only item left on my list. One last errand before the final week. The day had been meticulously planned, right down to my coffee order. I even allowed myself a small smile when the barista got my name right. It felt like everything was clicking into place, like the version of myself I'd been building, brick by brick, was finally ready to step forward. When I pulled into my father's driveway, the street was quiet, as usual. Neatly trimmed hedges, driveways rinsed to perfection, and that ever-present hum of quiet judgment the neighborhood seemed to inhale. I entered through the side door. No need to knock. I'd done this 1,000 times before. The first sign that something was off was the silence. The second was the air. It carried a strange stillness, like something was holding its breath. No clink of a teacup, no distant shuffle of TV channels, just the sound of my own shoes on tile. And then I saw it. A single sheet of paper, folded once, sitting dead center on the kitchen counter. No envelope, no salutation. Just 7 words scribbled in my father's unmistakable blocky print. Graduation's canceled. Expect court papers. That was it. Nothing more. Not even a "love, Dad." Not even a date. I stared at it long enough for the ink to blur slightly in my vision, but the words didn't change. I didn't pick it up, didn't fold it. I just stood there, listening to nothing, feeling nothing, until the cold edge of the countertop reminded me I still had a body that needed support. Not even a phone call, I muttered, voice low. Just ink. Like I'm a problem to be managed. I grabbed my phone out of reflex. My fingers moved faster than my thoughts. Opened my bank app, not because I expected trouble, but because I'd learned to check things when life suddenly veered left. That's when the second blow landed. My education account was frozen. The same account my father co-managed, supposedly for security and transparency. The message on the screen was clear. Access denied. Authorization revoked by co-owner. I tapped the contact button. It rang once before a voice answered, pleasant and mechanical. Thank you for calling Whitestone Financial. How may I assist you today? I tried to keep my voice steady. Hi, I'm trying to access a co-managed account ending in 4720. It says authorization has been revoked. One moment, please. The typing on the other end felt clinical, almost detached. Yes, that account was adjusted this morning. Authorization was revoked by the secondary party. That would be Mr. Arthur Grath, correct? Correct. Sometimes survival isn't rage, it's restraint. I thanked her. I hung up. And I left the note where I found it, as untouched as I now felt. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. The roads were nearly empty. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I didn't even think. I just watched the city blur past, as if it might rearrange itself into something kinder if I kept my eyes on the horizon. When I got home, I didn't take off my shoes. I dropped my keys on the counter, made a cup of tea I wouldn't drink, and sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet. The silence inside the apartment didn't comfort me like it usually did. It felt loaded now, like it was waiting to see if I'd break. Instead, I reached for my laptop. My desktop loaded slowly, as if it too were hesitating. I opened the folder labeled Thesis Final. My name was still on the file, my edits still intact. For now. That word held more weight than it should have. For now. A flash of memory surfaced, my last real conversation with my father. You're too public about private matters, Isolde. It wasn't advice. It was a warning. A coded way of saying, we don't deal with things in the open. We contain. We preserve the image. But here I was, with a scribbled note threatening legal action and a locked bank account, all because I wanted to speak. All because I thought I could live honestly. I opened my email, scrolled through the archive. I found it within seconds. A message from him sent 6 months ago. We're proud of your independence. This family will always support your next step. I copied the email, saved it into a new folder on my desktop, labeled it simply Evidence. I stared at the folder for a while, not because I questioned its necessity, but because I knew this was no longer just a setback. This was strategy. They didn't want to talk. They wanted me gone, quietly, as if I'd never applied, never studied, never existed as someone who could represent them. I got up, walked to the small suitcase I kept in the closet for overnight trips. No deliberation, no pacing, just movement. I opened drawers, grabbed clothes without much care, folded them with a precision I didn't feel. Click. The zipper sounded louder than it should have. 12 hours. That's all I needed to shift the ground back under my feet, because in those 12 hours, I watched myself vanish from a moment I was meant to own. The morning light cut through the blinds in my kitchen, casting long shadows over a table that still held my untouched tea from the night before. I hadn't slept. I didn't expect to. The suitcase sat by the door, half-packed, waiting for some version of me that might need it. But I didn't move. I just sat there, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the Brown University homepage. I tapped the link to the commencement program. They hadn't even hidden it. Right there under valedictorian remarks, it read, Bryn Calloway, not a typo, not a placeholder. My cousin, in full. Below that, the program's family recognition line read, Bryn will receive the ceremonial ribbon on behalf of the Grath family. I felt my stomach shift, like my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Bryn wasn't even supposed to be graduating this year, let alone representing our entire family at a ceremony that had been mine to lead. My name wasn't just missing, it had been overwritten. The last name was the same, but everything else had been stolen. I clicked into the RSVP section, something I hadn't checked in days. There, next to my name, wasn't the word graduate, or even speaker. It read, Family Support Assistant. Assistant. Like I was there to pass out pamphlets or refill the coffee trays. Like I hadn't spent the last 4 years building a platform big enough for our family name to stand on. I forwarded the document to myself, attached it to the folder I had started the night before, and gave it a new name, Proof of Reassignment. A line from a book popped into my head, something I'd read years ago but never forgot. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And yet, somehow, that's exactly what I'd done. Burned my identity to keep their legacy glowing. A text popped up. Layla, my old roommate. Hey, weird question. Thought you were graduating? Why's Bryn in your spot? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I clicked the university's Instagram page, already knowing what I'd find. There she was. Bryn, in a navy blue cap and gown, her blonde curls styled perfectly, makeup camera ready. Her caption read, The Grath Legacy Continues. Complete with a sparkle emoji. Legacy, my ass. I hit download. Saved the photo in the folder. Dragged it right beneath the RSVP screenshot, and stared at the collection now forming, like pieces of a puzzle I never asked to build, but couldn't afford to ignore. That's when the email came in. Subject, Graduation Program Update. I opened it with the same numbness I'd had since last night. It was generic, cold, clearly written by someone who had no idea they were delivering a bullet. Thank you for your prior involvement. Your contributions have helped the program succeed. Best of luck on your journey. No mention of my title. No reason for the change. Just a goodbye dressed as gratitude. The assistant who sent it? She'd been the one who asked me to deliver the keynote 3 months ago. She'd called it a perfect fit. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I just forwarded it to Morgan. my friend from law school, and typed one line beneath the subject. Is this actionable? I printed the email, took out a highlighter, and marked one sentence in yellow. As we welcome Bryn Calloway as the face of our program. Then I folded the paper clean, tucked it into a blank envelope, and stared at it like it might speak. I wasn't just left out. I was written out, in advance. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't spontaneous, it was rehearsed. That thought sat with me the entire train ride to campus, its weight growing heavier with every passing mile. I wasn't going to meet with anyone. I wasn't there to reclaim a moment. I knew that was gone. I was there for records, for traces, for proof. Brown's Media Archive Center was tucked behind the old library, a corner no one visited unless they were chasing ghosts. I knew the walk by heart. Every creaking tile and uneven step reminded me of sophomore year, the year I'd been featured in a campus spotlight series called Voices of the Future. Back then, I'd believed it meant something. I walked up to the front desk, where a tech assistant, barely older than some freshman, gave me a polite nod. Can I help you? Yes. I'm looking for a digital copy of the Voices series, specifically the episode from fall semester 2019, the Grath feature. He clicked around for a moment, his eyes scanning screens I couldn't see. He said. You sure it was under your name? Yes, Isolde Venn. I was the student featured that week. He frowned. That segment exists, but I'm not seeing your interview. Looks like the file was restructured and retagged. It might have been merged with a group session or archived under a different classification. I leaned forward. Is there a raw version? Maybe. But those are video archives. Takes time to retrieve. You want me to request it? Yes, please. I waited in the corner of the room for 15 minutes while he pulled the footage onto a small screen. When the video played, it was obvious. I wasn't there. Not a single clip, not even a voiceover. Just wide shots of group events, sound bites from others. But not me. The only place I existed was in a brief crowd scene, barely visible and blurred at the edges. You can't crop a person's existence, unless you plan to. That realization sank lower than any insult ever could. Back outside, the wind had picked up. It was sharp against my face, but I barely noticed. I wasn't just erased from a spreadsheet. They'd been deleting me frame by frame, year by year. The walk back from the archive office cut through the quad, and with every step, I started remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. Not just what was happening now, but the first time it had happened. 13 years old. A middle school writing contest. I had written a personal essay titled, "This is Why I'll Never Be Enough." It wasn't dramatic, just honest. I wrote about feeling like a placeholder in my own home. The essay won the district prize and was set to be published in the regional paper. It never was. My father had made a call, said the piece was emotionally inappropriate and unhelpful for family image. In its place, the paper ran a fluffy poem by Celine titled Spring Blossoms. When I'd asked why, he didn't lie. He didn't even soften it. We don't share things that make us look unstable, sweetheart. I remembered how my voice had caught in my throat, how I'd nodded like I understood, even though every cell in my body wanted to scream. That night, I stayed up rereading the essay, wondering if I'd gone too far by being truthful. I hadn't. They'd just been planning to delete me long before I realized what that meant. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. It was Vera. The name alone gave me pause. My aunt, my mother's sister, someone I hadn't heard from in months. Her message was short. Found something your mom saved. Didn't want it buried with her. Attached was a scan of a handwritten document. My essay. My original essay. At the bottom, in my mother's looping cursive, were the words, "She writes because she can't say it aloud. Don't let anyone take that from her." I stopped walking. Right there, on the sidewalk. Because in a single image, my mother had handed me back something I hadn't even known I'd lost. I got home and opened a new folder on my laptop. Pre-pattern suppression. I didn't need more reasons to be angry. I needed receipts. I pulled in everything: emails from teachers, deleted announcements, screenshots, this scan from Vera, and the metadata from the media room. It wasn't just about what had happened this year. This was a pattern, a structure, and I'd been trained to smile while it happened. You either walk inside your story and own it, I whispered, recalling Brené Brown's words, or you stand outside and hustle for your worthiness. I was done hustling. Later that night, I opened the scan of my essay again and read the last line aloud, not caring that no one was there to hear it. I don't want to disappear. I want to matter, even if it makes people uncomfortable. I highlighted that line. And as my own face stared back at me from the dark screen of my laptop, I whispered something that didn't sound like pain anymore. It sounded like truth. Turns out, they'd been editing me long before I ever hit publish. And if they edited me, maybe they thought I'd never find the raw version again. That sentence looped in my head like a faulty track as I pulled into the driveway of the Grath estate. It had been 3 days since Vera's email, since I found the essay, since I admitted to myself, this was never about a graduation. This was about inheritance, not the kind written in legal trust documents, but the kind you live in silence to protect. I was told this meeting would be about paperwork clarification. That was the phrasing. The kind of polite code my father's world ran on. Everything unpleasant got softened with professional language. You weren't cut out. You were reassigned. You weren't silenced. You were realigned with priorities. The house looked exactly as it always had. Not a leaf out of place, not a window smudged. Everything preserved to look lived in, but untouched. Like grief had skipped this place entirely. The only hint of time passing was the faint mildew near the front porch tile, probably ignored out of pride or blindness. A housekeeper opened the door. I nodded, didn't wait for her to announce me. I knew where I was going. The study still smelled like aged wood and cold leather. My mother's favorite lamp was gone, replaced by a minimalist brass fixture that looked like it belonged in a hotel. She used to read in that corner every evening, socks mismatched, always half a cup of tea left behind. Arthur stood near the window, his back to me, hands clasped behind him. A gesture that was part military, part patriarch, all performance. "We need to talk about the mess you're making," he said without turning. I stepped into the room. I didn't sit. "You erased me." He finally turned, slow and deliberate. His face was unreadable, but his voice was ice. "We protected you from yourself." I let the silence breathe between us. "Families like ours don't air out rot," he continued. "We contain it. You chose to rot in public. That makes you the shame." There it was. Not shouted, not whispered, just stated, like fact. He didn't raise his voice. He never had to. He spoke with the authority of someone who'd built a life around knowing no one would challenge him. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. My silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. I wanted him to keep talking. But he didn't. He walked around the desk and sat down, signaling the conversation was over, as if I'd just been corrected and would adjust accordingly. Instead, I turned and walked out. It wasn't until I reached my apartment that I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from restraint. My phone buzzed just as I kicked off my shoes. A LinkedIn notification. Celine Grath has updated her profile. Co-author, thesis on political optics in crisis regions. My heart stuttered. I opened the page. There it was. The title I'd spent 9 months drafting, revising, researching. Word for word. She hadn't even changed the formatting. I clicked through to the academic archive database just to be sure. Her submission had been entered 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. I picked up the phone and called Professor Linden. He answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," he said, voice tired. "You saw her profile?" He exhaled. "We were surprised when your name was pulled. We were told you'd stepped back under family pressure. The committee moved forward, assuming it was your decision." It wasn't. I know that now. After we hung up, I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Academic Integrity. Inside, I dropped the screenshots, Celine's profile, the timestamp, my original research log. Then I drafted an email. Subject: Formal complaint. Unauthorized academic reassignment. To University Ethics Board, BCC, MC, my lawyer. Body: attached. You'll find documented proof that Celine Grath submitted my thesis work under her name. Submission was made 6 weeks ago. I am the sole author of this work. My name has always been on it. It's time someone else proved otherwise. No closing signature, no pleasantries, just fact. That night, I opened the folder where I'd been storing my keynote drafts. I deleted them all. Every paragraph, every outline, every sentence shaped to appease an audience that would have never heard me anyway. Then I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "This is not about being invited back. This is about never letting them forget why I left." I wasn't angry anymore. I was operational. And if the record speaks for itself, then I just need to hit play in the right room. I was wiping down my kitchen counter, not because it needed it, but because sometimes motion was the only thing that kept me from spiraling into stillness. That's when the message came in. Vera, short, blunt, just like her sister had been. "I found it. Come alone." V. There was no explanation, no greeting, but she didn't need to say more. I knew exactly what it was. 2 hours later, I was driving through New Haven's back roads, following the turns toward Vera's cottage like muscle memory. I hadn't been there since the funeral. That day, she'd stood in the back pew, quiet, ignored. Arthur hadn't acknowledged her presence, and no one else had dared to. Her place was tucked between a nature reserve and a dried-up stream bed. Ivy climbed the siding like it knew better than to wait for permission. The front porch groaned under my step, but the screen door was unlocked. Vera opened it before I knocked. "You came." "You said you found it," I replied. She stepped aside, no small talk. "In the attic, inside a box marked Lily's Things. Thought it was just old scarves." The living room was dim, filled with heavy silence and the smell of dried lavender. She handed me a small wooden box. Inside were 2 things: a sealed envelope with my name in my mother's familiar handwriting, and a tiny cassette labeled in fading ink, "To my youngest, when they try to silence you." "She knew?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She knew," Vera said. "She left a trail. Just not one they ever wanted you to find." I didn't ask why she waited this long. We both knew timing was everything in this family. Speak too soon, and you're dismissed as unstable. Wait too long, and you're forgotten. Vera placed a small player on the table. I inserted the cassette, pressed play. The static cleared, and then her voice, softer than I remembered, but unshaken. "Isolde, they will call you dramatic, difficult, disrespectful, but you are none of those things. You are unmanageable by design." I felt something crack open in my chest. I knew they'd try to contain you. That's what they do. They wrap the strong ones in silence, call it tradition, call it respect, call it anything but what it really is: control. There was a pause, the sound of her turning pages. "This is the full trust document. Your portion, my instructions, my voice, in case they ever tried to erase me too. If they're hearing this, they already have. So I guess it's your turn to fight for what's rightfully yours." The tape ended with her humming, a lullaby she used to sing when I had trouble falling asleep. I hadn't heard it in years, but it dropped me right back into a nightlight-lit bedroom, wrapped in sheets too small for the weight I carried. I looked at Vera. She was already unfolding another paper. "She tried to file this a year before she passed. A clean transfer of your share, no cosign from Arthur. And it was denied. Blocked. He claimed instability, said it would be irresponsible." I read the document slowly. My mother's signature sat steady and sure at the bottom, dated 1 month before her final hospital stay. I pressed my thumb to it. Not for verification, for connection. When I got home that night, the city lights felt different, like the quiet didn't scare me anymore. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. New folder, matriarch file. I added the audio file, the scanned trust document, a photo I kept tucked in my drawer for years, my mother sitting on our back steps, pen in hand, notes scribbled in the margins of her book. In red ink, above her notes, she had once written, "She's not the quiet one. We are." I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my email. Subject, attached, audio testament. Trust dispute body. She knew. She left proof. Let's talk options. I hit send. My mother didn't raise a rebel. She raised a record. And tomorrow, they'll realize it wasn't a bluff. It was a brief. When I woke up the next morning, my mind didn't stall. No haze, no pause, no pacing across the apartment, wondering what to do. I moved like I already knew. I brewed coffee I wouldn't drink, opened the blinds halfway, sat down at the kitchen table, and pulled out the envelope Vera had handed me, the one with Mom's handwriting. But I didn't read it again. I had enough. I had what I needed. I opened my laptop and laid out 3 files across the screen. My locked education account screenshots, the email access logs I'd quietly requested weeks earlier, and the scanned authorization form transferring my graduation trust fund to Celine, a document with my name at the bottom. Only I never signed it. The signature was laughable, the slant was wrong, the loops didn't match. My E had always curled up, a habit Mom teased me about. This one hooked down like a copycat trying to pass a quiz they never studied for. They didn't even try to mimic my loops, I said aloud. It didn't feel like a joke. I created a new folder on my desktop and titled it Counter-Strike. Then I printed the trust document, highlighted the signature, added a sticky note on top. Forgery. I dressed, plain and neat, pulled my hair back. No makeup. I didn't want to look like I was performing. I wanted to look like a woman who came with facts. At the local courier office, I stepped up to the counter and handed over a manila envelope. To Arthur Grath. Urgent. Legal evidence enclosed. The clerk didn't ask questions. I paid in cash. Walked out. The sun was too bright for how cold the air felt. On my way home, I sent an email to Morgan, my attorney. Subject, attached, forgery document body. Please confirm timestamp of revocation and delivery. Within the hour, she replied. Confirmed. Signature is invalid. Legal risk is high if they push this to court. Suggest holding position until we review trust structure fully. I stared at the reply for a beat, then typed back. Don't hold. Draft the motion. They wanted a courtroom? We'll give them lighting. I meant it. By noon, I opened a new doc labeled Reinstatement Demands. I wrote without flinching. Thesis credit restored. Public acknowledgement of authorship. Correction of university records. Revocation of Celine's submitted trust documents. Official apology from academic board. I forwarded the doc to both the University Ethics Committee and Morgan. No commentary. Just the file. Just my name. The day passed with strange calm. I folded laundry, paid my internet bill, called Vera just to say thank you. She didn't ask what I was doing with the documents. She knew better than to assume I'd sit still. At 5:32 p.m., I got the delivery confirmation. Package successfully signed for by Arthur Grath. I imagined the moment, the weight of the envelope, the seal sliced open, the realization that I wasn't bluffing, that I'd learned their language, and now I spoke it better than they did. I didn't feel rage. I felt strategy. That night, I opened my private journal. Not the digital one, the real one. The one with pressed flowers and pages smudged from coffee and rain. I wrote one line. They banked on my silence. I invested in my memory. Then I closed it, locked it back in the drawer where I kept things worth protecting. The sky outside had turned deep purple, the kind of dusk that looks like bruised pride. I stood at the window and let it all settle. Not as weight, but as fuel. 12 hours ago, I folded. Today, I filed. Because I know how villains operate. They hide behind applause until the lights cut out. I didn't sleep that night, not from restlessness, but from intention. There was a focus that replaced exhaustion, a clarity that made every part of me feel sharper. At 7:43 a.m., my phone lit up with a message from a name I didn't recognize at first. "Did you mean to send that withdrawal email last month?" It was from a student assistant at the dean's office. I stared at the message, rereading it, fingers pausing mid-keystroke. I hadn't sent any withdrawal. Ever. I wrote back immediately. "Can you forward it to me?" A few minutes later, the file arrived. An email chain. My name at the top. My student ID. A message written in a professional tone. "Due to personal instability and a desire to preserve the dignity of the program, I am formally requesting to step down from all speaking roles effective immediately." They even used the phrase emotional volatility. I didn't know whether to laugh or smash something. Instead, I did neither. I saved the file, forwarded it to Morgan with no subject line. My phone buzzed again. Her response was swift, clinical. "This is manipulation. Metadata traces it back to a device registered to Grath Foundation PR." Another message followed seconds later. "Also, your login history shows unauthorized access using your credentials from a remote IP." Of course it did. I opened a new screen, traced the digital footprint. They hadn't just removed me. They impersonated me to do it. With tools I once trusted. With credentials I'd given them under the illusion of safety. Morgan's next message came through. "We can file this under cyber suppression. Want me to prep?" "No," I replied. "File it. Fully." I didn't want leverage. I wanted exposure. The day moved on with robotic predictability. I went through emails, added the forgery to the folder labeled image tampering, drank tea that had gone cold. By late afternoon, the universe decided I wasn't done for the day. The caller ID just said, "Caleb." My thumb hovered over the answer button. It had been 8 months since we last spoke. Not because of a fight, but because silence had settled in like fog between us. And I let it. "Hey," he said, voice shaky. "I owe you something." I said nothing. I need to tell you the truth before it ends up in court." Still silent. "Your dad, he offered to pay off my student loans if I walked away. Quietly. Said you were becoming a problem. That it was better for everyone if I just left." He didn't beg. He didn't even sound proud. He sounded like a man who just found out he was a pawn. "I told myself I was protecting you from them. But really, I took the bribe." I let the words hang in the air for a while. "Thank you," I said eventually. "That's more honesty than I ever got from my own family." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since the day he left. I hung up. No yelling, no closure. Just an updated entry in the growing list of truths I hadn't asked for, but needed to log. I opened the voice recorder on my phone. Pressed record. "Loyalty bought is loyalty bound to break. That's not betrayal, that's accounting." I saved the file and titled it, Invoice 1, Emotional Debt. An hour later, I sat at my desk and started writing something I never planned to post, but needed to create anyway. To those wondering why I vanished, I didn't. I was edited out. Below the sentence, I attached 3 files: the forged email, the digital trail metadata, and a short audio note of myself reading the lines Caleb admitted were scripted. No commentary, no hashtags, just the truth with timestamps. I scheduled the post. Midnight. They like to operate in silence. I'd return the favor, with documentation. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror. Not to admire anything, just to look myself in the eye. "They turned love into logistics," I whispered, "but I'm the one keeping the receipts. If they wanted a scandal, they should have checked who they cast as the villain. And once the truth is public, power starts to panic." The next morning, I walked through the stone corridors of the administration building like I had nothing to lose, which, in truth, I didn't. If anything, I had receipts. And receipts, in the right hands, rewrote legacy. I requested the registrar's building entry logs. I didn't expect ease, but I was polite, firm, and precise. The clerk blinked at me, unsure of how to process a student requesting evidence like a journalist. Just need verification on who entered the registrar's office on April 6th, I said. You can redact everyone else's name if needed. An hour later, I received a forwarded clip from security. Low resolution, blurry around the edges, but unmistakable. Celine, walking in, alone, holding a red file folder labeled Ven, I. She had on her public version smile, the one she used in interviews and brunches with donors. I stared at the still image, then saved it into the folder on my desktop named Manipulation Confirmed. I leaned back in my chair, cracking my neck just slightly to the side, as if shaking off an invisible collar. Then came the notification. Google Drive, shared with me anonymously. Subject, you need to hear this. A voice file. I hesitated for maybe a second, then clicked. Arthur, I don't care how you do it. Erase her before she realizes. Use the dropout line if needed. No one wants another family drama in the news cycle. Handle it. Another voice, probably legal counsel, muttered something indistinct. Arthur again. Frame it like burnout. She's always been sensitive. Makes it easier. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I opened my editing app, dragged in the audio file, added the screenshot of Celine. Then I drafted the post. Text first. When they call you ungrateful, play what they said when they thought no one was listening. Underneath, I attached the security image, the full voice recording, a scanned note, for every girl told she imagined it. Hashtag? I thought for a moment. Then typed. Erased by design, I hit post. Then I went silent. My phone buzzed for the next 2 hours nonstop. Comments, messages, private stories from people I hadn't heard from in years. A former professor tagged me. I always knew she was being written out, never had the guts to say it. Another from a university ethics officer. I resigned in 2022 after watching this happen too many times. Thank you for speaking. I didn't respond to anyone. I just watched the numbers climb, and then fall into rhythm. Not viral hysteria, but momentum. A steady wave, undeniable, unspinnable. Later that evening, I sat at my desk and recorded a message. No face, just voice. They built a legacy on silence, I said. I'm just giving it back the voice it tried to bury. Then I received the call. Unknown number. I let it ring twice, picked up. Is this Isolde Ven? Yes. This is legal counsel for Mr. Grath. He'd like to explore options for quiet resolution. I didn't laugh. I didn't pause. Tell him I don't settle. I show receipts. I hung up, then walked to my window. The city looked the same, but something inside me didn't. The footage was grainy, but the truth? Crystal clear. But maybe some graduations happen when we step out of the frame and into the fight. I didn't move for several minutes after that call. The view from my window hadn't changed. Brick buildings, fire escapes, shadows of pigeons fluttering across rooftops. But the feeling inside my skin was different. Still, certain. That stillness was broken only by my phone vibrating on the countertop. Lether graduate, 1M shares. The notification pulsed again. DMs, tags, pings. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly knew my name again, and not because I showed up in a family holiday card, because I showed up in their feeds, their group chats, their conscience. A former classmate from my freshman ethics seminar posted, she was the smartest person in the room, and somehow they still tried to erase her. Let this be a lesson. A faculty dean posted a neutral message, the kind they issue when the storm's too big to deny. We are reviewing our archival access and authorship protocol moving forward. They didn't say my name. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. That afternoon, I got an alert from a digital archivist I'd met once in a metadata workshop. Hey, your photo's missing from the 2020 Service Award banquet uploads. I stared at the message. I opened the university's digital gallery, scrolled to the frame I knew by heart. Gone. In its place, Celine. Same angle, same background, same award plaque. Her smile was wide, shoulders pulled back. She looked polished, intentional. I clicked View Info. Metadata said the upload had been updated 6 weeks ago, a switch so clean it left no trace. Unless you knew what used to be there. They didn't delete me, they replaced me. Like I'd only been a placeholder until the more agreeable daughter was ready to step in. That night, news outlets reached out. Most of them were digital publications, independent voices. But one of them was national. Legacy. Major reach. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need a mic to be loud anymore. An independent journalist posted an op-ed that gained traction fast. We don't just erase daughters from frames, we erase women from history. The piece was titled, The Grath Family's Two Daughters, One Legacy, and the War to Own It. I didn't read the comments, but I saved the article, filed it in a folder titled Public Record. That same evening, I received a message from Mr. Carlyle, my old AP Lit teacher. I wanted to say something back then, he wrote. I didn't know how, but I see you now. I didn't reply, but I screenshotted it, added it to my acknowledgement post-fact archive. The next day, I found myself sitting alone at a cafe downtown. It wasn't a place I normally went. Too loud, too crowded. But something in me wanted to hear voices that weren't curated. The news was playing on a silent screen above the counter. Headline: Graduation Controversy. Family Scandal Challenges Ivy Image. And there I was. Finally not invisible. My face, full, center, not filtered through someone else's story. People noticed. I caught glances, a few whispers. But no one said anything directly. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting it go lukewarm, letting the noise settle around me like ambiance rather than threat. My phone buzzed again. A shared Google Calendar notification. Subject: Joint Mediation, Grath Family, VR, Venn. I tapped View Details. Date: Monday. Location: University Legal Boardroom. Time: 9 odd a.m. I stared at the event title for a long moment. I used to dream of graduating in that building. I never thought I'd litigate there instead. And when you stop letting people write your ending, you finally start your own. Monday came gray and cool. The kind of weather that didn't ask for attention, but demanded stillness. I walked into the legal wing of Brown University wearing navy slacks and a pressed white blouse. Simple, unassuming, sharp. No makeup, no jewelry. Just me and the facts. The boardroom wasn't dramatic. It was sterile. Cold white lights, an over-polished table, bottled water with labels peeled off. The nameplates sat evenly spaced. Mine read, Ms. Isolde Venn. Arthur and Celine were already seated across from me. Arthur had his hands folded like he always did when playing defense. Celine kept her eyes down, but her nails were freshly done. No one said hello. The university's legal representative began. This meeting has been scheduled to address the formal claims brought forth regarding academic fraud, cyber interference, and familial conflict intersecting with institutional procedure. He turned toward me. Ms. Venn, please proceed. I slid the folder forward. Its title was embossed in bold. Reassignment Timeline. Property, Intellectual, and Identity. Inside was everything. Dated, time-stamped, signed, confirmed. The fake email, the voicemail from Arthur. The CCTV still of Celine with my thesis file. The LinkedIn screenshot. The submission discrepancy logs. All the dots, finally connected. My attorney summarized. This isn't a sibling rivalry. It's impersonation supported by institutional failure. What began as family conflict became administrative manipulation. Celine finally spoke, voice trembling, too polished to be unrehearsed. I wasn't trying to steal anything. I was just helping manage optics. I didn't flinch. Optics are what you polish when you're hiding rot. Arthur remained quiet. No apologies. Just his classic neutral expression. Trained detachment. The university rep shifted, looking visibly uncomfortable. Then one of the board members cleared her throat. "There's one more item to be addressed." She pulled out a printed email. "From Dr. Linwood, tenured faculty, Department of Political Studies." She read aloud. "To whom it may concern. I apologize for remaining silent during the reassignment process. The withdrawal of Isolde Ven's thesis was flagged, but I failed to inquire. I now believe that was a mistake." There it was. Not a parade, not a confession, just a sentence that cracked the wall. Silence followed. Then the panel began deliberation. When they returned, the verdict was direct. The authorship of the thesis will be officially reinstated to Ms. Isolde Ven. Celine Grath's submission will be withdrawn from academic record. A beat. The university will issue a public acknowledgement of mishandling. A non-disclosure agreement has been prepared. "No," I said. The room paused. "I'm not signing it." The rep blinked. "Ms. Ven, it's a standard offer." "I'm not interested in standards. I'm interested in memory. This doesn't get buried." Arthur's jaw tightened. Celine looked like she might cry, but I didn't feel sorry. Not anymore. The meeting closed with an awkward shuffle of papers. Chairs scraped, the door opened. We all stood, but no one spoke. At the exit, Arthur stopped. His voice was low, flat. "You're really doing this?" I paused beside him. "No." "You did." I looked him in the eye. "I'm just undoing it." I walked out without waiting for a response. The hallway outside was empty. Just me, my shoes clicking softly against the stone floor. The hearing ended, but for once, I wasn't the one being edited, and I didn't need their permission to be permanent. The ride home after the mediation wasn't triumphant. It wasn't anything, really. I kept the windows rolled down, letting the wind fill the car with air that didn't feel recycled. There was no music, just the hum of tires against pavement and the dull ache behind my temples, reminding me that truth, even when spoken, takes something from you. By late afternoon, I was back in my apartment, standing in the center of the living room, not entirely sure what to do next. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even exhausted. What I felt was clean, like whatever version of me that had needed their recognition had been scrubbed off in that boardroom. Then my phone pinged. A message from Bryn. "Can we talk? I didn't know. I want you to hear it from me." I stared at it longer than I meant to. Then I replied with a simple, "Cafe on 6th, in an hour." She was already waiting when I arrived. No filters, no staged angles. Just Bryn, hair in a loose bun, hands clenched around a coffee cup, shoulders curled slightly inward. "I thought you opted out," she said as soon as I sat down. "They told me you didn't want the pressure, that you were overwhelmed. I believed them." I didn't interrupt. "I didn't know until I saw your post, the audio, the photo. I didn't know what to say." I waited. I only realized the truth when the university emailed me, saying I'd been removed from the program credits. It didn't make sense at first. But then, I looked back. I saw what I didn't see before. "I'm sorry." I let the silence stretch. "You didn't steal anything," I said, calm. "You were handed something I built. That's not the same." Bryn looked down. Her lip trembled, but she held it. "Do you forgive me?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. Forgiveness assumes I'm still waiting on it. I'm not. She nodded slowly. There was no drama, no tearful apology, just the sound of chairs scraping the floor as she stood and left. I didn't watch her go. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, "Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from knowing you never needed it to move." I uploaded a photo I'd taken months ago, a soft shot of my graduation gown draped over the back of a chair in my living room. I'd never posted it before. Back then, it felt like a reminder of what was taken. Now, it felt like a reminder of what I reclaimed. Caption: "It was never the robe. It was who they thought could wear it." I didn't tag anyone. Didn't expect likes. At midnight, just before I turned off my phone for the night, a notification popped up from Brown University's official account, honoring graduates who overcame adversity, featuring Isolde Venn. No tag, no email, no warning, just a headline. Recognition doesn't erase erasure, but it does show who's still writing and who finally ran out of ink. And I didn't need their permission to be permanent. At dawn, the park was empty, except for the faint crunch of gravel beneath my shoes. I'd brought everything I needed: a fold-up chair, a thermos of tea, my old tripod, and a white envelope with my name in my mother's handwriting. The garden path was still wet from last night's rain, but the sky had cleared just enough to let the light break through in thin lines. I found a bench that faced the trellis, the same one Mom used to bring me to during finals week, when I couldn't breathe, when everything felt too big to name. I unfolded the chair, set the tripod up with quiet precision, and clipped my phone in. No audience, no podium, no music swelling in the background. Just me and morning air and the speech I never got to give. I pressed record. Then I opened the envelope. The paper inside had been folded 3 times. The ink was slightly faded, but unmistakable. You graduated the moment you stood alone without folding. The robe was never the proof. You were. I sat down, pulled my robe from my tote bag, and draped it gently over my shoulders. It still fit. It wasn't about size. I took a breath and began reading the speech I'd written 6 months ago. Good morning. I'm honored to speak, not because someone gave me permission to, but because I earned this moment with every step, every paper, every time I didn't let myself disappear when it would have been easier. My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just read, out loud, to no one. And for the first time, that felt like enough. When I was done, I pressed stop, folded the robe back into my bag, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat in silence, letting the weight of it all lift gently, like fog rising from cold ground. Back at my apartment, I uploaded the video. No caption, no filter. By noon, the comments had started. The most real graduation I've ever watched. Her voice made it sacred. She didn't need a crowd, she needed truth. I didn't respond, I just watched. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter, addressed to Arthur. I didn't intend to send it. It began simply. This isn't to reconcile, it's to clarify. You didn't break me, you broke the illusion you ever held me. I used to think silence was strength. Now I know it's often survival. But not anymore. I don't need your version of peace. I built my own. I folded it, placed it in a clean envelope, labeled it, never deliver. Then I filed it away. A week later, I met with an academic advisor in a small shared office on the 2nd floor of the Student Services Building. No press, no banners, just 3 people around a table with coffee and folders full of startup paperwork. We launched a fund that morning, the Unedited Fund, designed to support students who've been institutionally silenced, those who were told their voices were too loud, too dramatic, too early, or too much. When asked why the name, I said, some stories don't need rewriting, just room to be heard. They nodded. No one clapped, and that was fine. Later that evening, I took my graduation robe out one last time. I pressed it carefully and framed it in a shadow box. On the bottom, in gold foil lettering, I placed a plaque. They tried to cancel the ceremony, so I created the moment. I hung it by my desk. The robe still fits, but I outgrew what they tried to dress me in. Hi, I'm Althea. I used to think being the dependable one, the quiet one, meant they'd see me someday. But when my grandmother passed, my parents gave everything to my sister. Then they tried to sue me for what she'd left to me in her will. They said I manipulated her, that I was unstable, that I didn't deserve it. Funny how the only person who ever saw me clearly was the one they left to die alone, and the one I stayed for. They erased me from photos, cropped me out of stories, but now they want what I have? Isn't it strange how family rewrites the truth when it no longer fits their version of you? And the worst part? They almost got away with it. Almost. End with a pause. Let that last word echo. They didn't forget me. They just deleted me. The thought lingered as I stood in the upstairs hallway of my parents' home, staring at the framed photo from last year's Thanksgiving. Corinne stood in the center, one arm around Mom, the other lifting a wine glass. My spot, where I clearly remembered standing that day, was cropped out. Not blurred, not shadowed. Cropped. Like I had never been there. I could still smell the pot roast reheated too many times and hear the muffled clinking of silverware downstairs. No one had asked me if I wanted a plate. That wasn't new. I'd eaten gas station sandwiches in parking lots that tasted less like loneliness than that house. They always said it wasn't personal. Don't take it the wrong way, Mom told me once when Corinne was invited to speak at church and I wasn't even mentioned. You're just not the presentable one. Whatever that meant, it stuck. Downstairs, the memorial continued. Someone was retelling a story about Grandma Della making homemade jam. I could hear Corinne laughing, too loud, like she was playing to a crowd. Maybe she was. She always had a knack for sounding generous, while making sure everyone knew just how much she'd done. I took a slow breath and stepped into the kitchen for water. The dishwasher was humming. I reached for a glass, but Corinne's husband beat me to it. "Oh, Althea, you're still here?" he asked, surprised. "Yep," I said, filling the glass and walking away before I said something I'd regret. Later, during the slideshow, I stood in the back corner. One by one, the images played. Grandma in her garden, Corinne helping her blow out birthday candles, Mom and Dad sitting beside her hospital bed. And then, nothing. Nothing of me. I blinked, certain it was just the order. Surely they hadn't finished the montage yet. But it kept going. Corinne with her high school diploma, Corinne at prom, Corinne helping Grandma at the senior center event. Not a single frame with me, not even the photo I took at Christmas when Della had worn the ridiculous red hat I crocheted for her. I stared at the screen, willing it to flash back to me. It never did. The worst part wasn't being forgotten. It was being erased. That night, after most guests had left, I sat on the edge of the guest bed. I'd folded the thin blanket down like I was staying in a stranger's Airbnb, not the house where I'd spent half my childhood. I opened Instagram. Corinne had already posted, "Family is everything. Miss you every day, Grandma." The photo showed her, Mom and Dad at the gravesite, the same one I had been standing in, right beside Corinne, just hours earlier. Only in her post, I wasn't there. She had cropped me out, again. The caption read, "Just us and the ones who truly mattered." I didn't comment. I didn't message her. Instead, I stared at the screen until the battery dropped to 1%, then powered it off. There was nothing to say. They didn't forget me. They just deleted me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay still in the stiff guest bed, the kind with sheets that feel more decorative than lived in. The kind that say, "You're only staying until you fix whatever made you show up." Downstairs had gone quiet, but the silence didn't feel restful. It felt performative, like a house holding its breath after politely dismissing a guest. I heard Corinne's laugh echoing in my head long after she'd gone home. That polished, practiced laugh. I wondered if she ever used her real one anymore. The phone was still off. I didn't need another version of the truth spun by filters and captioned with half-hearted grief. I sat up, swung my feet over the side of the bed, and pulled the leather satchel from beneath the nightstand. It was worn but reliable, soft at the corners from years of overuse. I unbuckled the clasp and reached for the envelope I had tucked deep inside. No return address, no sender name, just thick, weighty paper and a postmark from 2 weeks ago. I stared at it for a moment longer, then slid my finger under the flap and peeled it open. Inside was a single-page letter, typed neatly, with a name signed in blue ink at the bottom, E.M. She was Della's nurse. The letter said so. "She never stopped talking about you," it began. "She called you her only witness. She made me promise to send this after she was gone. I was her nurse. I saw. I remember. Attached to the back was a photocopy of a note, handwritten, shaky, but familiar. Althea stayed, not because she had to, because she chose me. The kind of sentence that doesn't just validate your past, it recenters it, like someone flipping on a porch light you didn't know was still wired. I let the paper rest in my lap, my fingers tracing the indentation of each word. The room, suddenly, felt smaller. There were photos on the dresser, not ones I had ever seen displayed in the house before. These must have been pulled from albums and dusted off for the memorial. Most featured Corinne. Her birthday at 5, dressed like a pageant queen. Her graduation. Her moving into her dorm. Our mother always beside her, hand on her shoulder, looking like she belonged in a magazine spread for proud American mothers. I searched the frames for me. When I did appear, it was background, obscured, turned away, holding someone's bag, or standing just outside the shot. You get used to being in the corners of other people's stories, but that letter, it was mine, centered, clear, named. I didn't cry, not because it didn't mean something, but because there was nothing left to drain. I'd spent years mourning a relationship I was never allowed to fully have. I folded the letter back into the envelope, returned it to the satchel, and zipped it shut. Standing, I walked over to the window and cracked it open. The air outside was crisp, smelled faintly of early spring and pine sap. I breathed it in slowly, like something sacred. Then I pulled my laptop from my bag and flipped it open. I stared at the blinking cursor for a few seconds, then typed 5 words into the search bar. Estate rights, Washington State. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation, because love doesn't leave documents behind. But the truth? It usually does. By the time the sun climbed through the dusty blinds of the guest room, I'd already been up for hours. I'd watched the sky turn from gray to gold, listened to the house creak back to life, and sat in the stillness as if it could explain something to me. It didn't. I slipped into the bathroom before anyone else was up, washed my face in silence, and made sure my eyes looked steady. Not tired, not glassy. Just fine. I didn't need pity. I needed distance. Downstairs, the smell of reheated bacon and burnt toast hit me before I reached the bottom step. Velma was already at the stove in her robe, her hair brushed back neatly, like she always did for guests. Funny how I still felt like one. "Morning," she said, without turning around. She didn't ask how I slept. At the dining table, Corinne was seated in her usual spot, middle seat, middle of attention. Her plate was already full, like someone had made it for her. Probably Mom. I slid into the far end of the table, next to the wobbly chair that had always been mine. Dad sat to my right, reading the local paper like he couldn't hear a thing around him. Or maybe he just chose not to. Corinne reached for the butter, and without being asked, Dad passed it to her. "You want eggs?" Mom asked, only to Corinne. "I'm good, they're kinda greasy," she replied, wrinkling her nose. Mom smiled. "You always notice the details." I sipped my coffee slowly, trying to decide if the bitter aftertaste was the coffee or something deeper I wasn't ready to name. "So," Corinne began, her voice bright and casual, "we were talking last night, about the house, about everything." I glanced up. The we wasn't explained, but I knew what it meant. "We're just thinking through logistics," she continued, like this was a business meeting. "It's not about fairness or anything, it's just practical." Dad grunted behind his newspaper. Then, almost too casually, he mumbled, "Not like you ever paid rent living in Grandma's house anyway." The fork in my hand paused midair. The silence at the table expanded like a slow leak in a tire. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. Corinne cleared her throat. "We all helped, Dad. Remember? I brought groceries that one time." "That one time," I repeated, softly, not looking up. No one responded. I let the moment pass, as if the silence might do the speaking for me. But it didn't. It never had. The thing about being useful in a family like mine is, if you don't narrate your own worth, they'll write you as background noise. Later, I stood at the sink rinsing my plate, thinking of a different sink in a different kitchen. One where I used to stand after giving Grandma her pills for the night. I would wash her dishes, fold her laundry, and make a grocery list for the week. Always alone. That memory pulled me back like muscle memory. I had learned to flush IVs before I learned how to file taxes. I knew which canned soups had less sodium, which cough syrup made her nauseous, and which nights her pain meant she couldn't sleep unless I sat beside her until morning. Corinne once texted, "Wine night, can't help. I still have the message." Funny how something that short can stretch forever in your mind. Back in the dining room, Corinne leaned over her coffee. "You know, it's not like you made some big sacrifice, Althea," she said lightly. "You didn't have a job, no rent, nothing tying you down. You stayed because you had nowhere else to go." Velma nodded, barely. Just enough to be seen. Dad said nothing. "You didn't give up anything," Corinne added. "You gained. Grandma gave you a place to crash when you couldn't figure your life out." My fingers tightened around my mug. I kept my eyes on the steam swirling up. In a different version of me, the one they preferred, maybe I'd lash out, maybe I'd cry. But in this one, I just breathed. "You rewrote me in your version of the story," I thought. "I just haven't edited mine yet." I stood up, rinsed my cup, and left the table without a word. That evening, upstairs again, I lay on the bed scrolling through my phone. Nothing much had changed, but when I tapped open the family group chat, family, all caps, it wasn't there. I closed the app, reopened it, still gone. I scrolled back through my texts. A system message popped up. "You were removed by the group admin." I didn't need to check who the admin was. I set the phone down on the nightstand, screen facing up, notification light off. No reply, no reaction. Because sometimes the loudest way to answer is to say nothing at all. The next morning passed slowly, dragging itself behind me like wet laundry. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't join them for breakfast. I knew what was coming. By noon, I was walking the sidewalk outside Marlon Vexley's office in downtown Spokane, every step tightening something in my back. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. The office hadn't changed. Same dusty blinds, half pulled in the windows. Same placard with his name in gold foil, chipping at the corners. The receptionist, Susan, still as stiff as ever, gave me a thin smile and nodded me in. Marlon stood as I entered. His handshake was brief, his expression unreadable. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon pledge and stale air. Corinne was already seated, sunglasses still on indoors, like she had something to hide. Mom followed behind me a minute later, all fake warmth and sorry for the delay smiles. We sat. Marlon cleared his throat. "Thanks for coming," he began, folding his hands over a manila folder. "Let's get right into it." He slid a crisp document from the folder and began reading aloud. "To my granddaughter, Althea Monroe, I leave my residence, my personal savings, and all household belongings." I didn't flinch. No mention of Corinne. No mention of splitting. No, to be shared by. No, as determined by future agreement. Just mine. Corinne stiffened. I watched her jaw twitch. Velma coughed lightly, then sipped her tea with exaggerated grace. The room shifted. Marlon continued. "Dated and notarized 6 months before Mrs. Della Maynard's passing. Signed, witnessed, and filed." He looked up. "Any questions?" Velma didn't respond right away. Instead, she pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. "We actually have a supplemental document," she said. "This was drafted closer to the end." Revision. Corinne chimed in. "Grandma changed her mind. She wanted to be fair. We were with her when she dictated it." Marlon raised a brow, but opened the envelope without comment. Inside was a second will, newer by date, only 3 weeks before Della died. This version divided everything equally between me and Corinne. "She regretted leaving Althea everything," Velma added. "She told us that." I said nothing. I didn't blink. Marlon looked through the pages, slower than usual. This is unnotarized, he said carefully. And it's not on the same stationery as her other legal documents. She wasn't in a condition to go through the formal process, Mom answered quickly. We just wanted her wishes recorded. I leaned forward gently. And where exactly did she sign this? Corinne avoided my eyes. At home, she dictated. I wrote. I nodded. Marlon cleared his throat again. If this is a claim of a revised will, it would need to be accompanied by witnesses, a medical clearance of mental capacity, or notarization to override a previously filed document. It's still her words, Velma insisted, and we expect it to be honored. I didn't argue. I picked up the second document myself. My fingers traced the date, 2 weeks before she passed. A quiet timestamp no one else seemed to notice. Except I did. Because I remembered exactly what the nurse had told me. The day Della stopped speaking, stopped eating. The day the hospice care record showed her unresponsive. That date was 5 days before this so-called revision. I sat back. May I have a copy of that for my records? I asked, my voice even. Marlon hesitated, then nodded. Velma narrowed her eyes slightly, but said nothing. Corinne fiddled with the hem of her sleeve, then said almost too casually, We just want what's fair, Althea. It's not about taking anything away from you. Of course not, I said. It never is. Outside, the wind had picked up, swirling loose leaves across the sidewalk. I tucked the copied pages into my folder and stood. Velma rose too. We're just trying to do right by her. I looked at her, really looked at her. You're trying to rewrite what she already made clear. Then I left the room, not in a rush, not in anger, just with purpose. After leaving Marlon's office, I stopped at a corner cafe 2 blocks down. It was barely 4 p.m., but the sky had already dimmed, cloud cover moving in low and thick like a lid over the city. I sat by the window with a lukewarm chai latte I didn't finish, and the copy of the forged will sealed in an envelope inside my bag. I wasn't surprised they'd try something like this. I was just disappointed they'd been so sloppy. Back at my apartment, technically a short-term rental near the university, I turned on a desk lamp and slipped off my coat. I had a consulting call in the morning and a syllabus to finalize, but I couldn't bring myself to look at either. Instead, I laid the documents on the dining table, read through each line again, and stacked them neatly. Then came the knock. 3 short taps. A pause. Then one more. Not the kind of knock a neighbor uses. Not the rhythm of delivery. It had familiarity, intentionality. I froze, then moved slowly to the door. Through the peephole. Velma and Corinne. Of course. I opened the door only halfway. Can we come in? Just for a few minutes? Velma said, smiling like she was offering cookies, not chaos. We have an idea. I stepped aside. Not because I wanted them in, but because I wanted this over with. Corinne walked in first, sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She scanned the room like she expected me to live in clutter, then perched herself at the kitchen island. Velma followed more slowly, placing her handbag on the counter like she might be staying longer than planned. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask if they wanted to sit. Corinne was the first to speak. Of course she was. Look, we've been thinking. This doesn't need to be a big deal, she said, tone measured, fake sweet. We can handle this between us, quietly, like family. I said nothing. She glanced at Velma, then continued. You've got the house now, the savings. All we're saying is, it might be better for everyone if it was shared. No courts, no depositions, no lawyers sniffing around Grandma's medical records. She paused, like she was giving me a moment to come to my senses. The court doesn't need to get involved, she added. We all know how these things can spiral. I lifted my tea, now cold, and took a small sip just for the pause. And what do you think fair looks like? I asked finally. Corinne brightened. 50-50, the property, the accounts, even split. No drama, Velma chimed in. It's not about the money, Althea. It's about dignity, keeping this within the family. Grandma would have wanted that. My jaw clenched, but I kept my voice even. That's funny. I thought she made her wishes very clear. In writing, filed, stamped, notarized. Velma leaned forward, palms flat on the counter. She was confused, sweetheart. You know how people get at the end. She was lucid enough to sign legal documents 6 months before she passed, I said. Corinne rolled her eyes. Come on, you think this is really worth dragging us through court over? It's not a good look. Velma softened her tone. I don't know what you're going through emotionally, but suing your own family, it raises eyebrows. People talk. At church, they're already asking questions. There it was. The real threat. Reputation, appearances, control through image. I leaned back against the counter, arms folded. I remember the last time someone told me to keep quiet for the sake of appearances. Grandma's medication got skipped that weekend. 2 days, Velma, because you couldn't handle the sight of her in a hospital gown. Silence. Velma's expression cracked, but only slightly. Corinne looked down at her phone like it had suddenly become urgent. I stepped away, opened the drawer next to the fridge, and pulled out a thick envelope, already sealed, addressed, and labeled with the name of my attorney. I placed it on the counter between us. You came here thinking I was scared. I'm not. I tapped the envelope. This is the full hospice log, dated, certified. It proves Grandma was unconscious when that second will was allegedly created. Velma blinked. Corinne's face went blank. I haven't filed it yet, I added, but I will. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I just let the words hang there like a final period. Velma stood, adjusting her cardigan. You don't have to do this. No, I said, but I will if you keep pushing. Corinne looked up, eyes narrowed. You really think you're above us now, don't you? No, I said again. I just finally understand that keeping quiet never earned me anything but erasure. Velma's tone turned cold. You're making a mistake. I walked to the door, opened it wide. You should leave before I forget what being civil feels like. They didn't argue. They just walked out, Corinne first, Velma trailing behind like she thought I'd call her back. I didn't. After they left, I didn't sit down right away. I stood at the door for a minute longer, hand resting on the knob, feeling the air they'd displaced as if it might still carry weight. It didn't. The quiet came back just like it always does, unbothered, unbent. That night, I didn't eat much. I picked at a microwave meal, typed out 2 sentences of the syllabus draft, then closed my laptop. My head was too loud for logic and too focused for sleep. The next morning, I walked to the courthouse downtown. It was cool out, but dry. Spring teasing Spokane with a false sense of early warmth. I had filed my hospice documentation 3 days earlier, and while it wasn't legally required to follow up, I wasn't interested in trusting anyone else's definition of due process. Inside, the civil clerk's desk looked exactly as it always had, rows of folders, a woman typing too quickly on a keyboard too old. I gave my name, the case reference, and waited. She clicked, then clicked again. We don't have that file in the system yet, she said, eyes still on the screen. My fingers flexed slightly. I have the drop-off receipt, I told her, reaching into my folder. I unfolded the slip and laid it flat. Her eyes flicked down, then up. Huh, must have gotten misrouted. Sometimes the internal mail. She paused, gave a half shrug. Just gets delayed. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She took the receipt, stood, and disappeared into a back room. I waited 6 minutes. When she returned, she was holding my file. Found it, she said brightly. Looks like someone filed it under miscellaneous probate instead of active challenge. Totally routine. I nodded. Can I get a timestamp added for when it was first received? She hesitated. I can write a note for the judge. I'd appreciate that. I walked out without thanking her. That afternoon, I met Mira Lennox at a quiet coffee shop just outside campus. I'd messaged her earlier in the week, and she'd agreed, somewhat reluctantly, to meet. When she walked in, her hair was tied up in a messy bun, eyes darting around the cafe, like she expected someone else to be watching. She ordered black coffee, no cream, no sugar. "I won't take much of your time," I said, once she sat. "I just need a confirmation of the dates we discussed." Mira shifted in her seat. "Look, I've been thinking. This whole thing, it's complicated." Her voice didn't sound uncertain. It sounded rehearsed. "You were the one who told me she was nonverbal the last 2 weeks," I said carefully, "that she hadn't held a pen in 5 days before passing." "I don't know," she said. "I don't want to be involved anymore. I didn't sign anything official, and I don't want to be dragged into court." Her hands were wrapped tightly around the coffee cup, knuckles pale. "Someone talk to you, Mira?" She didn't answer. "I just want what's true on the record." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really am, but I can't help you." She left a $5 bill on the table and walked out before I could say another word. Back at my apartment, I tried to return to my work, just enough to distract myself, but the echo of Mira's voice kept looping in my head. Not what she said, what she didn't. I shut the laptop and decided to stop by Marlon's office to pick up additional paperwork. He hadn't called me in, but I didn't care. I wanted to see something. The reception area was quiet when I arrived, the bell above the door giving a soft chime. Marlon was out, but his assistant said I could grab what I needed from the file basket on his desk. As I walked into his office, I froze halfway through the threshold. On the far wall, just behind his desk, was a framed photo. A family shot. My family. The same old group picture from Della's backyard. Summer barbecue, paper plates, plastic cups. I remembered standing just behind the table, next to Grandma. In the version on his wall, I wasn't in it. Cropping is an art, so is a mission. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before speaking. "Did Marlon say where he got that?" I asked the assistant as she passed by. She looked over. "Oh, that one. Your mother brought it in last week. Said it was the last photo Della ever approved for public use." I smiled just a little. "Right, public use." I took my file and left. That evening, I went into the drawer next to my desk and pulled out a different copy of the photo. The original. My arm was around Della's shoulder, her hand resting on mine. I folded it carefully, not out of anger, but preservation. I didn't need to display it. I just didn't want to forget that it existed. "Let them crop," I murmured, slipping it back into the drawer. "I'll carry the uncut version inside me." I opened my laptop. This time, I didn't hesitate. I uploaded the hospice logs, certified, attached the original date stamp, typed a short cover letter to my attorney, and hit send. Then I sat back, looked at the frame on my wall, the one I'd left empty. "If they want a war of edits," I said aloud, "I'll go original." 3 weeks passed. Fast in hours, slow in wait. The courthouse was cold that morning, not by temperature, but by design. Pale floors, gray walls, a faint hum in the vents that never went away. I arrived early, not to be prepared. I'd done that already, but because I refused to let them see me walk in late. Elena Ruiz, my attorney, met me outside the deposition room. She wore her confidence like a well-fitted jacket, her hair pinned up tight, one folder in hand, and a second tucked beneath her arm. "You won't have to say much today," she said calmly. "Let them unravel." I nodded. Words weren't my weapon today. Paper was. Inside, the room had 2 long tables, as expected. I took my seat across from Corinne, who was dressed for theater. Black blazer, pearls, hair blown out, not a single flaw out of place. She didn't look at me. Velma sat just behind her, lips pressed thin, hands clasped over a bag that didn't quite match her shoes. Subtle, but it told me she had packed this moment in a hurry. Across the aisle, their lawyer sat quietly, reviewing his notes. Marlon wasn't here. He'd referred out, citing a potential conflict of interest. That was one way of saying he'd finally realized what game they were playing. I didn't bring a briefcase, just a thin folder with exactly 4 items. Enough. The clerk swore us in, outlined the rules, and then asked if we had evidence to enter. Elena stood, offering a small USB drive. We'd like to begin by playing a short video submitted anonymously to our office last week. Corinne's face shifted slightly, but she didn't object. Velma tilted her head like she'd missed a key sentence. The judge nodded. The video began. It was grainy, vertical frame, clearly a live stream replay. Corinne sat in a kitchen, hers, probably, sipping from a glass of red wine. Laughing, talking to someone off screen. I didn't really take care of Grandma, she said, waving a hand like it was all silly. But I had to say I did. People expect that, right? She sipped her wine again and laughed. The screen went dark. No one spoke. Velma's composure cracked just enough to show something underneath. Surprise, maybe. Disappointment, definitely. The family attorney closed his notebook and leaned back slightly, like he was doing the mental math on how much to bill for this hour. The judge looked at Corinne. "Would you like to clarify anything from that clip?" he asked. Corinne blinked twice. That was taken out of context. The judge didn't look convinced. I hadn't moved. He turned to me next. "Ms. Monroe, any response before we move to the documents?" I opened my folder slowly, deliberately, then pushed the contents across the table. Hospice logs, signed, time-stamped, and cross-checked with facility records. Medical bills, in my name. Not Velma's. Not Corinne's. The final notarized will, filed 6 months before Della died. And one photo, me sitting on the porch with Della. No editing, no cropping. Just her hand on mine, the kind of touch that didn't need explanation. I looked at the judge. "I stayed," I said. "Not because I didn't have options, but because no one else did." I said nothing more. He scanned the pages, took his time. Then he cleared his throat. "These records are consistent, official, admissible, and they support your claim." He turned to the other side of the table. "Unless you have additional legal documentation that meets or exceeds the standards presented, I will be issuing a final determination in Ms. Monroe's favor." The silence in the room shifted again. This time, it landed heavy on Corinne's side. She looked frozen, like she didn't know whether to argue or retreat. Velma stood. Not abruptly, not defiantly. She just stood, straightened her jacket, and said nothing. She didn't look at me as she walked out. The attorney followed her. Corinne lingered a beat longer. Then she looked at me. "Ma, I hope you're happy," she said flatly. "You've torn this family apart." I didn't answer. Because the truth? They'd been tearing it apart for years. I just stopped letting them hide the evidence. Outside, the sky had cleared. Not bright, but clean. The kind of day that didn't demand joy, just offered stillness. I stepped onto the courthouse steps and exhaled. Not relief, not triumph. Just breath. Steady, full, clear. The morning after the hearing, I packed in silence. One suitcase, my laptop. A box with just enough books to remind me who I'd always been beneath the noise. The apartment was still under my name for another week, but I didn't want to sleep there again. Not after they stood in my doorway, not after the courtroom fell quiet, the moment their story collapsed under its own weight. I folded the key inside a plain envelope and left it at the front desk. No note, no forwarding address. Just my name, printed once, neatly. No one called, no one texted. It was better that way. I took the 10:45 a.m. bus out of Spokane. The ride to Walla Walla was uneventful, and I was grateful for it. I stared out the window as fields and fences blurred by, letting the quiet settle in places where memory had grown too loud. The new house wasn't much, yet. A one-story bungalow with peeling green paint and a porch swing that creaked even without weight on it. The backyard was wild with weeds, and the kitchen smelled faintly like old wood and forgotten grease. But it had good bones. It was enough. I spent the first week painting, muted sage for the kitchen, soft white for the living room. I replaced the porch swing with one from a local thrift store, sanded and repainted it myself. I cleaned windows, fixed the back gate, and patched a leak under the bathroom sink without needing anyone else's help. There was something sacred about doing things without being seen. When it was done, I printed out a small sign and taped it to the inside of the front door. "You matter here." It wasn't for me, not exactly. It was for the girls I hadn't met yet, the ones who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go, or the older woman whose kids stopped calling years ago, or the quiet soul with a duffel bag and a look in their eyes that said, "I don't know where else to be." I called it the hearth, a place to land, not a place to prove anything. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table with a chipped mug of tea, I opened my laptop. I hadn't posted online in months. Not really. I deleted most of my social media, not out of drama, but because I was tired of being misrepresented by squares and captions. But that night, I felt something shift. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't name names. I didn't mention the court case or the will or the family that left me out of their photos. I just wrote, "Sometimes they erase you, quietly, over time, until one day you realize the version of you they've kept is one they needed, not one that's real. But the thing is, you can start again. You can write new pages, one sentence at a time." Under the post, I attached the only photo I'd kept. Me and Grandma Della, hands touching, no filter, no edits. It wasn't a statement, it was an offering. I closed the laptop, brewed more tea, and went to bed early. I didn't think much about it. But the next morning, when I opened my inbox, I had over 200 unread messages. People had shared the post, reposted it, written their own stories in the comments. This was my aunt. This was my dad. I thought I was the only one. Some messages were long, others were just 3 words. "Thank you, finally." One woman offered to donate books. Another asked if she could send a small monthly gift to help with utilities. A retired teacher from Idaho wrote to say she hadn't spoken to her sister in 8 years. But after reading my post, she might call her. Just once. I didn't respond to all of them. I didn't try to. It wasn't about managing an audience. It was about being part of something that didn't need a spotlight to be seen. Later that week, a care worker called. She'd heard about the hearth. Said she had a young woman, 19, just out of placement. Nowhere to go, no stable contact, quiet, withdrawn. I said yes before she finished the sentence. 2 days later, she arrived. She didn't say much. She carried everything she owned in a grocery store tote. Her sneakers were too big. Her coat was 2 sizes too small. I didn't ask questions. I showed her the room, the kitchen, the laundry setup. Told her there was cereal in the cupboard, coffee on the counter, and tea in the drawer. She nodded once. Then again. That was enough. After she went to bed, I stood in the hallway looking at the frame I'd hung near the front door. The same one from Spokane. Still empty. I could have filled it 100 times by now, but I hadn't, because it didn't need to be. I brewed more tea, no champagne, just peace. The sun came up like it always does, casting a soft glow through the front windows of the hearth. The house was quiet, but not the kind of silence that comes from absence. This one was full, filled with the smell of oatmeal simmering in the kitchen, the soft padding of socks down the hallway, a rustle of pages from the living room where one of the women had curled up with a book before breakfast. I moved through the space like I belonged there, not like someone proving a point, but someone keeping a promise. I brewed tea, poured a mug for myself, and left another on the counter in case someone wanted it later. Then I stepped onto the porch, watering the succulents lined up in mismatched pots. Most had been gifts. A few were rescues, like us. Inside, the 2 young women staying that month were already settling into their own quiet rituals. One had an online class at 9. The other was job hunting and liked to begin her mornings scrolling job boards in the breakfast nook, chewing a pencil like it owed her something. No one needed me to fix anything. That was the best part. Mid-morning, my phone vibrated with a message from an old classmate I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, you didn't hear this from me, but..." Attached was a screenshot of a local article from Spokane. After string of internal complaints and recent bad press, PR firm Beatrix Collective shutters quietly. Founder declines comment. Another screenshot followed. Velma's name. A church bulletin. With deep regret, we announce Velma Quinn's resignation from the Women's Leadership Board, effective immediately. No explanation, just lines between lines. Too much attention, maybe, or too many whispers. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen for a moment. There was no mention of me, no speculation, no sidebar quotes, no triumphant footnote. I preferred it that way. I didn't want a paragraph in someone else's article. I didn't need a headline. The truth had already done its job. Later that day, as I checked emails, I noticed a subject line that stopped me cold. From Corinne.deadpersonalmail.com. Subject: I hope you're happy I didn't open it. I hovered my mouse for a second, then moved on to the next message. Some stories don't deserve a reply. Some stories already had too many rewrites. It was enough to know she had typed it, sent it, and sat with the silence on the other end. I didn't delete it. I just let it live where it belonged, in the unread. That evening, after dinner was cleaned up and the girls retreated to their corners of the house, I walked the hallway. The walls now held art from people who'd stayed. Watercolors, charcoal sketches, paper collages. Nothing had frames. That was on purpose. Except for one. At the end of the hall, near the door, hung the same frame I'd carried with me from Spokane. The one that used to hold family photos, then held nothing, then held the truth in its blankness. I dusted it gently. Still no picture. I didn't feel the need to fill it anymore. A new girl had arrived the week before. She was 16, sent from a group home, barely spoke. Yesterday, she asked about the frame. Who was supposed to be in there? I'd smiled and said, someone real. She'd nodded like she understood more than I'd expected. Tonight, I whispered the same answer aloud, this time to no one in particular. Then I turned off the lights, one by one, until the house was wrapped in quiet again. I made one last cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and exhaled. Not in celebration, not in regret. Just as a woman who had finally stopped running. Hi, my name's Bianca. And this year, my family didn't forget me. They just didn't make space for me. No room, no explanation, not even a glance when I showed up. They booked themselves into a luxury resort for Thanksgiving and told the front desk, just the real family. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? They'd been erasing me for years. One silent dinner, one missing photo, one stolen thank you at a time. And when I finally stopped funding the life they pretended to earn, they called me cruel. So here's my question. What do you do when the people who raised you rewrite the story and leave your name out completely? They knew I was coming. I had confirmed it in the group chat 2 weeks ago, sent my arrival time, even dropped a message the night before. Landing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Excited to see everyone. No one responded. Still, I told myself they were probably busy. That maybe they were planning a surprise, or something overly elaborate like Mom used to do for Dahlia. The Breakers was exactly how I imagined it. Grand, serene, blindingly expensive. The kind of place where families wore matching outfits and argued softly about spa appointments. I stepped out of my rideshare, dragging my navy blue suitcase behind me, heels clicking too sharply against the marbled entrance. I saw them before they saw me. Mom, Dad, and Dahlia, sitting by the fireplace in the lobby. They weren't laughing, not quite. Just comfortable, relaxed, like they belonged here. And then they saw me. Mom's eyes landed on mine for a split second. Then she looked away. No smile, no wave. Dad scratched his cheek and turned toward Dahlia, who didn't even flinch. The kind of silence you don't trip over. It's laid down like a rug. I approached the check-in counter, smiled politely at the woman behind the desk, offered my ID. "Bianca Holloway," I said, tucking my hair behind one ear. She clicked a few keys, frowned, and clicked again. "I'm sorry," she said, voice polite, brows gently pinched. "I don't see a reservation under that name." "That can't be right," I replied, still keeping my tone soft. "I'm with the Holloway family. They should have booked the rooms." She double-checked the system, then again. I could feel it, that tightening in my chest. A man wheeled a baby stroller past me. Someone to my left whispered, "Is that her?" And I didn't know if they meant me. "I do see 2 rooms," the clerk offered, hesitant now. "One for Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, and one booked by a Miss Dahlia Holloway for herself and a child." Then she looked up. "That's all?" My lips parted slightly. "So, nothing under my name?" Before she could answer, I heard it. That unmistakable voice, with a smile behind it, sharpened to cut glass. "Oh, Bianca made it." Dahlia strolled up, her heels announcing every step. White slacks, designer bag, phone in hand. "We weren't sure you'd come. Thought you'd be buried in work, as always." She looked at the concierge, then me. "We only booked for the family." I turned to her slowly. "I am family." She tilted her head. "You know what I mean. The active family." A smile so sweet I could almost smell the perfume behind it. I glanced back at Mom and Dad, still seated. Mom pretended to scroll through something on her phone. Dad coughed, adjusted his collar, and looked toward the gift shop like it had just caught on fire. The clerk stood frozen. My heart didn't race. It just stilled. I inhaled, nodded once, and said, "Thank you for checking." Then I turned to Dahlia. "You've made your point." She blinked, like she didn't expect me to be so calm. "Wait, Bianca, don't be dramatic." I smiled. "It's not drama," I said. "It's math. 2 rooms, 4 names. 0 for me." I pulled the suitcase handle tight and walked away. No one followed. Not even Mom, not even to explain. My shoes made no sound on the carpet. Out the tall glass doors, sunlight poured over the palm trees, gentle and clean. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I stepped outside. But the silence inside me? It screamed. The valet asked if I needed help with my bag. I shook my head, then stepped off the shaded awning and into the afternoon heat. The sun fell across the sidewalk in wide, golden strips. Everything around me looked like a scene from a holiday commercial. White linen, clinking glasses, kids running barefoot through sprinklers across the lawn. I stood still. Instead of walking back inside to argue, I tapped my phone. The Lyft app was open in seconds. I selected the airport. A silver sedan would arrive in 4 minutes. That was enough time to breathe, not cry, not call anyone. Just breathe. A group of guests stepped out behind me, laughing, dragging matching monogrammed suitcases. The man held the elevator door for his wife. She kissed his cheek. I looked down at my phone again. 3 minutes. It hit me, just for a second, that I didn't belong there. Not just at the breakers, but in that family dynamic. I was the punctuation at the end of a sentence no one intended to write. The car pulled up. The driver, a man in his 50s with a kind face, rolled down the window. "For Bianca?" "Yes," I said, opening the back door and sliding in. As we merged into traffic, I leaned my head against the window and watched palm trees blur past. My phone buzzed once. Then again. I didn't look right away. It could have been a work email, a reminder to pay the electric bill. But no. Dahlia. Then Mom. Then home. I turned the screen down. The notifications continued. Messages stacked one after another, like a slow-moving avalanche. Dahlia. "Amy was asking where you were. I didn't know what to say." Lorraine. "You didn't have to make a scene in front of people. This was not the time." Milton. "This isn't how we handle things." Dahlia again. "You're being overdramatic. You always do this." I hadn't said a word. Not to them. Not to the concierge. Not even to myself. But somehow, my silence was the drama. I took a long, quiet breath and looked out the window. There were rows of orange trees just past the fence line. The smell of citrus hung in the air, subtle but grounding. It wasn't rage I felt, not quite. It was a rising certainty. They never called when I got the grant. Not when I was awarded that startup fellowship in DC, or when my research hit peer review. No group text. No, we're proud of you. Not even a heart emoji from Mom. But now that I'd left the lobby without permission, suddenly I was the headline. The driver turned onto the road toward the airport. "You okay back there?" he asked gently, glancing in the mirror. "I will be," I said. I muted my phone. 42 missed calls, 8 voicemails. I tapped on one just to see. It was Dahlia. "You left Amy hanging. She brought your favorite candy. I mean, you know how much she looks forward to seeing you? You couldn't stay for just one dinner. We were trying to have a nice family weekend." The tone wasn't angry. It was performative, like she was rehearsing for someone else's sympathy. I deleted it. Then the rest. Somewhere between the second turnoff and the airport entrance, my shoulders stopped clenching. I arrived at the terminal, stepped out, thanked the driver, and walked into the chill of artificial air conditioning. The high ceilings echoed with rollaway bags and boarding announcements. I checked the next available flight. The cost didn't matter. While waiting in line, I opened my phone again. This time, I saw a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You could have just stayed quiet, but you made a scene. Hope it was worth it." No name, no context, but I knew who it was. I locked the screen, placed the phone in my coat pocket, and looked up at the flight board. My gate was posted. They weren't angry because I left. They were angry because I didn't stay to be controlled. I found my seat by the window, row 14. The aisle was still busy with passengers trying to fit oversized bags into overhead bins. I leaned against the cold window pane and exhaled slowly as the plane began its taxi down the runway. The hum of the engine rose, steady and deep, but my chest was still louder. Not panicked, just full. Like a glass one tilt away from spilling. Somewhere beneath us, Palm Springs shrank into tidy neighborhoods and then into open, endless sand. I didn't cry. I don't think I even blinked. My phone was in airplane mode, tucked into the seat pocket, out of reach, and still too close. I wasn't thinking about the hotel, or the text, or the sound of Dahlia's voice when she said, "the real family." That would be too obvious. Instead, what showed up, uninvited but familiar, was a Tuesday in October when I was 12. I had set the table myself. No balloons, no cake, not even a happy birthday from anyone before school. Dad had gone to a tennis mixer. Mom had a migraine, or said she did. That night, I boiled pasta, poured a little sauce from a jar, and sat down alone at the table. I had wrapped my own gift weeks earlier. A secondhand paperback I'd picked up at Goodwill and saved, just to feel like something arrived for me. They remembered Dahlia's 14th with sushi trays, a photographer, and a weekend rental at the lake. The photo from that day lived on our fridge for years. Me? I learned how to clear plates without making a sound. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I never expected different after that. I closed my eyes and let my head rest against the seat. The hum of the cabin surrounded me like a blanket, muffled but not comforting. A few years ago, we had a family dinner. Just the 5 of us: Dad, Mom, Dahlia, Amy, and me. It was after my startup's second round of funding. I had just signed a contract with a federal research grant. But the conversation that night wasn't about that. It was about how Dahlia helped my parents secure their home refinance. How smart she was with numbers. "You know, she even helped us cover the down payment," Mom said, gesturing at Dahlia with her wine glass. I remember sitting there, chicken half cut, and wondering if my mother actually believed that. I was the one who wired the money. I was the one who absorbed the tax penalty so they wouldn't lose the deposit. I had the paperwork, I had the receipt, but I said nothing. I cut another piece of chicken and nodded like everyone else. There's something about being erased that doesn't always come with malice. Sometimes it's just indifference. And honestly, I'm not sure which one hurts more. The flight attendant passed by with a cart. I waved her off gently and turned my head to the opposite window. Somewhere in my carry-on was a folder labeled Documents, Personal, Family. Inside it was everything I'd kept. Emails, bank transfers, screenshots. I never planned to use it. It just felt safer knowing it existed. On a visit home a while back, I wandered into the hallway near the guest bathroom and saw a new addition to the wall. A photo collage in a crisp white frame, centered under a sign that read, Walker Family, 4 hearts, 1 home. There were 12 photos. Mom and Dad in Key West, Dahlia and Amy carving pumpkins, a Christmas brunch, a summer picnic. Me? Not once. Not in the background, not even blurred in the corner. I didn't say anything. I took a picture of the collage with my phone and sent it to my work email with no subject line. I still have that email saved in an unsorted folder. It's probably the only family photo I'll never delete. The captain's voice crackled overhead, announcing our initial descent into Denver. Outside, the light had changed. The sky was still, no sunset yet, just that gray-blue tint that always came before it dipped into orange. I kept looking out the window, not to see anything, just to let the stillness take shape. The truth wasn't that they forgot me. The truth was, they remembered exactly how they wanted the story to go. By the time I got home, the sky over Denver had faded to a soft, dry gray. The apartment was still as I left it, quiet, with that faint metallic scent of cold air that sneaks in through the window seals. I dropped my keys in the dish by the door and turned on the living room lamp. A pool of yellow light pushed back the dimness. I didn't even take off my coat before opening my laptop. It woke up instantly. 46 unread emails. The names popped out first. Mom, Dad, Dahlia. Then a couple from mutual friends of the family, the type who never really spoke to me, unless it was about Dahlia's birthday party plans, or if I could recommend a good dermatologist. One subject line read, "Are you okay?" The next, "This is not how we do things." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a folder tucked deep in my cloud drive. Family transfers, receipts. I had saved every wire confirmation, every tuition bill I'd paid for Amy, every invoice I had covered and signed for over the past 8 years. Not out of spite, out of instinct. People forget things too easily when it's convenient. Scrolling through the files, I clicked open the PayPal receipt from last Monday. $327.44. For Amy's school's Thanksgiving-themed photo shoot. I had paid for it without being asked. Dahlia hadn't thanked me. She never did. But the very next day, she posted a glossy portrait of Amy in a knitted sweater and corduroy dress, with the caption, "So proud to support Amy's dreams, always." No tag, no mention, just her holding the spotlight like it belonged to her by birthright. I could have commented, could have said, "Glad it worked out," or "You're welcome." But what would that have solved? The game wasn't about gratitude, it was about erasing me so she could be the one applauded. I minimized the window and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a beat too long. Eventually, I opened another folder, older than the first. It held digital slideshows, ones I designed over the years for family reunions. I had arranged the photos, edited the transitions, even timed them to soft instrumental music. I clicked through one from last year. Dahlia, Amy, our parents, extended cousins. Me? Not once. There were photos I had taken, shots I remembered because I was the only one holding the camera. But somehow, in the final version, I was absent. Not blurry, not turned away. Just removed. That's when it hit me. They didn't mind using what I built. They just didn't want me standing in front of it. I got up and walked over to the side table near the bookshelf. Inside the second drawer was a small navy blue gift box, unopened, with a silver ribbon still crisp and smooth. I'd brought it to give to Amy, something I had picked up during a business trip to Portland. A simple pearl hair clip, elegant, modest. Something I thought she'd wear when she was older. Something not meant for a camera. The note inside was still there. For you, not for posting, just because. I didn't unwrap it. Instead, I placed the box back in the drawer and slid it shut. That kind of silence doesn't scream, it lingers. I sat back down at my desk, opened a blank draft in my email, typed out one sentence. Since I'm not part of the family, effective immediately, I'm also not part of the payroll. No salutation, no punctuation after that. I hovered over send, then clicked save as draft. Some things weren't meant to be delivered yet, but the words, they were no longer stuck. The next morning came quietly, with a pale, frost-edged light cutting across the living room rug. I made coffee the same way I always did. 1 scoop too strong, black, no sugar. I drank it standing up by the window, watching Denver begin to move again after the holiday. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and while most of the country was hunting for deals or rolling back into bed, I was putting on my best Navy suit and heading to Boulder. By 9, I was backstage at the Colorado Biotech Leadership Summit, flipping through a folder of talking points I didn't need. I'd written them, lived them, bled for them in labs and boardrooms no one in my family ever cared to ask about. But today wasn't about proving anything. It was about showing up because I always had. The ballroom was packed, rows of scientists, investors, academics, 2 federal officials from the NIH Grant Committee, and a few startup CEOs who'd once tried to take credit for my work. I walked up the side aisle as they introduced me, not a tremor in my step. I took the stage, looked out into the sea of eager, curious faces, and spoke for 32 minutes about the ethics of AI in pharmaceutical trials. They listened. They took notes. They clapped, standing, loud, and longer than expected. Afterward, someone from the Denver Post snapped a photo as I shook hands with one of the grant officers. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking at the projection behind me. My own slides, my name bold and quiet under the phrase, Lead Researcher, Phase 2, Authorization Confirmed. Hours later, I got a Google alert. A business blog ran a short piece. Colorado's biotech maverick, the mind behind quiet impact. I didn't repost it, didn't forward it to the family thread. Not because I didn't care, but because I already knew who wouldn't. That night, back in Denver, I curled up on my sofa with a wool blanket and my laptop. I was checking emails when I saw a notification from Instagram. Idalia Holloway just posted for the first time in a while. I tapped it open. There she was, on the rooftop of the Ivory, posing with Amy, wine glass in hand, ring light reflecting off her cheek. Caption: Nothing better than family time on a rooftop that reminds you where you belong. My mouth curved, just barely. I knew the rooftop. I'd helped design it 3 years ago when my firm invested in the Ivory's sustainability upgrade. I didn't put my name on the investor list. I owned 17% through a silent holding group. But I picked the teak benches and the solar lighting specs. I chose the curved railing so kids like Amy couldn't climb over. They were sitting on my roof, posing like they owned the view. And the world kept clapping. I set my phone down and opened my inbox. A grant update from NIH had come in, routine. I meant to forward it to one of my junior analysts, attach my notes. But I was tired, clicking too fast. My fingers slipped. Instead of forwarding, I hit reply all to the last group thread with my family. The message read, Excited to lead Phase 2 implementation. Thanks to the board for the continued trust. Ready to push forward with the full ethics framework next quarter. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Dad? Wait, you're leading what? I didn't respond. 2 minutes after that, Dahlia. Why didn't you tell us this? You could have said something. That's huge. I looked at her message for a moment, then typed back a single period and hit send. No words. Just the smallest signal that I saw her scramble, and that it wasn't mine to soothe. Later that evening, I checked LinkedIn. A message waited from my cousin Ethan, who I hadn't spoken to in years. You're kind of a legend in my department. Didn't even know we were related. Wild. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I smiled. Small, quiet, not for anyone else. The smile faded by the time I brushed my teeth. I stood over the sink in my bathroom, staring at the way the overhead light cast sharp lines across my face. The mirror didn't offer any revelation. Just me, makeup gone, hair pulled back, eyes still sharp. I didn't feel victorious, just finished. Back in my home office, I opened my laptop again. Not to write, not to research, just to see. There it was. 3 new emails, all in the last 20 minutes. The first was from my mother. Subject: What you did. I clicked. You know your sister's always been emotionally delicate. What you did, publicly, humiliated her. You've put a wedge in this family that may never heal. This family is not a competition, Bianca. It never has been. I almost laughed at that last line. The second email, shorter, came from Dad. You could have given us a heads up before going public like that. It's not that we're not proud. We just didn't know. It looks like you were hiding something. And the third, from Dahlia. You always have to make it about you, don't you? All those years of helping, and you never let us forget it. You did it just to hold it over us. Admit it. You didn't do any of it out of love. I sat with those words for a moment. Then, I highlighted each sentence that mattered. Put a wedge. Did it out of love? Should have warned us. I didn't reply. Not to them. Not yet. Instead, I opened a different message. This one from Vernon. The subject line, Your call. He didn't write much. They made their choices. So did you. You were right to stop. Let me know if you want me to speak with the accountant. I read it 3 times. You were right to stop. That was all I needed. I minimized the window and opened the family finance folder on my desktop. A small subfolder labeled Trust Distribution Vernon Family sat untouched. I moved it to an encrypted drive. Done. Out of reach. No longer my burden to manage or explain. Then I started typing. 2. Milton Holloway, Lorraine Holloway, Dahlia Holloway. Subject: Support discontinued. Effective immediately, I will no longer cover or support the following. Amy's private school tuition, monthly HOA fees for the Naples condo family property, upkeep and landscaping, shared credit card tied to my account, all subscription services and utilities billed through my name. Please make arrangements before the next billing cycle. I am not available for negotiation. This is final. Bianca. I blind copied Vernon, and I hit send. No flourish, no extra words, just clean edges. Then I closed the laptop and leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me. For the first time in years, I heard nothing. No calendar ping, no bank alert, no digital leash tying me to them. They had told themselves for so long that I was the strong one, which, in family code, meant the one you could pile everything on because she'd never drop it. The one who'd pay, patch, fix, and stay silent. I didn't drop the weight. I handed it back. The evening stretched long and still. Outside, the street was wet from melting sleet, cars hissing along slowly. My phone lay screen down beside me. It hadn't buzzed since I sent the email. That silence should have comforted me. But I knew it wasn't peace. It was recoil. Their chaos, searching for somewhere new to land. I didn't try to stop it. I logged out of every shared account, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, deleted the guest Wi-Fi profile I'd set up at their place 2 years ago, changed the password to the Dropbox folder labeled Amy's Tuition Records. At midnight, just as I was about to power down completely, my phone lit up. Caller ID, home. The name sat there on the screen like it belonged to someone else. I didn't answer. I didn't even consider it. I watched the call ring through, then stop. No voicemail, just static left behind. They used to say I was ungrateful, that I didn't understand how much they'd done, but I knew the truth. You don't rip roots from someone who watered the whole tree and expect no collapse. Saturday morning unfolded like it always did, with the rituals I clung to like armor. I stirred the sourdough starter, fed it with quiet precision, made my coffee, and sat on the edge of the couch, half awake, scrolling my phone with the kind of numb autopilot only early mornings can bring. But the moment I opened Instagram, something in the air changed. Not physically, no wind shifted, no eerie silence fell. But internally, the atmosphere tightened. A chill crept in that had nothing to do with the room temperature. 13 notifications, a tag, a mention. And then, that post. The photo was familiar. Delia, glowing, poised near the railing of the Ivory's rooftop garden. The same rooftop I'd spent months helping to design, fund, and furnish. She stood in a shaft of sunlight, like she was born to be there. Amy tucked under one arm like a glossy accessory, a flute of Prosecco balanced in her other hand like a crown jewel. Her caption was long. Too long for the standard attention span. I had to tap more to read the rest. That alone should have told me something. Some people think success means abandoning the people who raised them. We gave so much, loved as best we could. But not every heart knows how to love back. Not everyone values loyalty. And when they erase you in silence, you find your voice another way. I stared at the screen, blinked once, then again. Then took a sip of coffee, not taking my eyes off the words. Within seconds, I saw that Mom had reposted it. No edits. No commentary of her own, except a single line below it. We did everything we could. Some things can't be bought. The likes climbed fast. So did the comments. I recognized the names. Neighbors from the cul-de-sac, people from church, a couple of Mom's old book club friends. So sorry, Dahlia, you deserve better. This is heartbreaking. She'll come around, they always do. No one said my name. No one had to. I was the ghost in the margins of their grief. The silhouette they filled in with whatever version of me made the story work best. I knew the role they'd given me. The ungrateful daughter. The sister who chose money over love. The one who walked away. Except I hadn't walked away. I had carried. Quietly. Constantly. And until now, without complaint. I set the coffee down. The warmth suddenly too sharp against my palms. Opened my laptop, navigated to a folder I never thought I'd need to open like this. Family records. I had kept it obsessively, updated it weekly, not because I was waiting for a fight, but because patterns leave trails. And I knew, somewhere deep down, that one day I might need to show mine. Receipts, PDFs, screenshots, wire transfers, tuition letters from Amy's private school with my email as the main contact. It was all there. I opened Canva, created a clean professional carousel. Not a smear campaign, not a rage spiral, just facts. Quiet, cold, organized. Slide 1, $47,380.60. Paid in tuition and fees for Amy's education over 6 years. Slide 2, $21,700 property upkeep, including roof repair, plumbing fixes, and 3 years of back taxes on the house I didn't live in. Slide 3, $14,200 gifts, vacations, emergency dental work, Dahlia's car repair after the little accident last December, a loan that was never repaid, never acknowledged. I didn't add red arrows or circles. I didn't highlight or italicize or annotate, just data. Like I was preparing a report. And on the final slide, I was told family doesn't need to keep score. But when you're erased, silence becomes consent. I posted the carousel on Instagram, shared it to LinkedIn too, with a caption as stripped down as my patience. This is not revenge. This is correction. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't write a name. But anyone who knew the people involved could connect the dots. Within an hour, the post had over 3,000 shares. By lunchtime, Dahlia's original post had vanished. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't need to. The echo of it had already been absorbed by too many. Still, its removal felt like a small shift in gravity. A quiet admission. Messages started trickling in, from someone I hadn't spoken to since senior year. I always wondered how she afforded all that. Now I know. Another pinged in from my father. No greeting, no punctuation. Was that really necessary? I read it. Let it sit. then closed the message. And then came Amy's. "Is it true you bought me the clip?" She meant the barrette. The rhinestone one she wore at her school recital last spring. The one she'd gushed over. The one Dahlia said had come from some boutique she couldn't remember the name of. I replied, "Yes." That was all. No qualifiers, no self-defense. Just the truth. By sunset, the post had cleared 10,000 shares. I never checked the comments. Didn't open the think pieces or reaction threads. I wasn't interested in shaping a narrative. This was never about followers, sympathy, or going viral. It was about reclaiming the space where my story had been erased. Not louder, just clearer, not bitter, just true. Some things can't be bought, but some things, once given, deserve not to be buried. The quiet that followed was different. Not the kind that asked to be filled, but the kind that settled into the bones. I spent Saturday night with a book open, but unread, letting time pass without naming it. When the light outside turned gray-blue again, I didn't resist the morning. I got up, pulled on a thick sweater, and poured myself coffee. The alert came at 8:17 a.m., an email from Rowan and Doyle, LLP. I recognized the name. Vernon had used the same firm when setting up his living trust 10 years ago. The subject line read, "Notification of trust disbursement adjustments. Immediate." The message was formal, cold in tone, but warm in implication. To all listed beneficiaries of the Vernon Holloway Family Trust, effective immediately, all financial disbursements to Milton Holloway, Lorraine Holloway, and Dahlia Holloway have been suspended indefinitely. This decision was made following actions deemed inconsistent with the values of the grantor. In Vernon Holloway's own words, "Cruelty cloaked in image cannot stand beside dignity earned in silence." Distribution to Bianca Holloway will continue under the same terms, with full discretion moving forward. This decision is final. It was copied to all three of them. I wasn't BCC'd. I was CC'd. Equal footing, equal visibility. At the bottom, Vernon had signed off directly. "I stand with Bianca. This is final." I didn't cry, but I did sit back and close my eyes. I imagined the moment they'd opened it, Mom reading it over the edge of her coffee, Dad muttering something about being blindsided, Dahlia furiously texting her attorney friend in Los Angeles. And for once, I didn't care. I scrolled through Facebook on instinct and saw Lorraine had posted something cryptic, probably aimed at whoever would listen. Sometimes it's the ones closest to you who cut the deepest, and still, you pray for them. Underneath, a friend had commented, "Did Vernon really cut you off?" She hadn't replied. Dahlia's Instagram account had disappeared completely. Not just the post, the whole profile. I didn't bother checking LinkedIn. By midday, I had jazz playing softly through the speakers. The smell of bergamot tea filled the room. I opened my planner and flipped to the next quarter's budgeting sheet. I crossed out one line in red, "Family disbursements, $3,000 month." Next to it, I wrote, "Q1 R&D expansion, green light." There was a photo frame on my desk now. I hadn't always had one, but I'd printed all still from the summit. Me mid-speech, hands open, eyes steady. It wasn't for social media. It wasn't a message. It was just for me. When the email arrived from Amy that afternoon, I almost didn't open it. But the subject line was simple. "Just wondering." Inside it read, "Mom's crying. Grandpa won't talk to her. Are you okay? I miss you." I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, then moved the email into a folder labeled "For Later." Not because I didn't care, but because I knew that any answer right now would be too soon, too complicated, and too heavy for a child to hold. By the time the sun had started to dip, I'd gone for a short walk, cooked a meal that didn't come from a microwave, and made peace with the fact that this version of life, wasn't a temporary chapter. It was the book I was finally writing on my own terms. I closed my laptop, exhaled slowly, and whispered into the still room. They lost me long ago. They just hadn't realized it, until now. The days that followed were quiet, in a way I hadn't known quiet before. Not the kind that comes when no one's talking, but the kind that settles in after the shouting has stopped. There were no more emails, no more calls, just the hum of the heater cycling on and off, the slow melt of snow outside the window, and a stillness I didn't have to earn. I was halfway through my second cup of tea when the email arrived. The sender's name didn't ring a bell, but I opened it anyway. Bianca, I probably shouldn't write this, but I've been thinking about it for days. I saw the post, and I saw how your mom and Dahlia responded. I was there for some of those birthdays, some of those dinners. I watched how they treated you, and I never said anything. I should have. I'm sorry. There was no ask, no attempt to reconnect, just a late apology sent into the void. I didn't respond. I bookmarked it and closed my laptop. Sometimes truth shows up late, but at least it shows up. That evening, as the light thinned across the city and the first flakes started to stick, I walked to the drawer where I'd placed the Navy gift box. The ribbon was still intact, tied like it had been waiting for the right moment, not the right person. I opened it slowly. Inside, the pearl hair clip rested on its cushion. Underneath was the note I'd written months ago. For you, not for Instagram, just because. I held it in my hand longer than I expected. The metal was cold, but not unkind. Instead of mailing it, I placed it into a new velvet pouch I had ordered online earlier that week. I rewrote the card. Same message, slightly different ending. For later, when truth matters more than appearances. I didn't know if Amy would ever wear it, but I knew I wouldn't give it while it could be claimed, displayed, or spun into someone else's post. Some gifts are meant to be earned in time, not delivered on schedule. A few days later, an envelope arrived. Handwritten, uneven, clearly from a child. The return address was the family's house in Naples. Inside, on lined notebook paper, in purple pen, was Amy's handwriting. Aunt Bianca, I found the receipts. I found the clip too. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I miss you more than I miss the stuff. Love, Amy. I sat with it. Not in sadness, but in something older than sadness, acceptance. I read the letter 3 times. Then, I folded it carefully and placed it in the same drawer as the clip. Children learn what love looks like by watching who gets left out. They notice who always takes the picture but never appears in the frame. They know who pays, even when no one says thank you. And eventually, they figure out who kept showing up. Until they didn't. That week, I met Vernon for tea. We didn't talk about the fallout. We didn't need to. We discussed his neighbor's dog, a grant application I was reviewing, and the merits of mulled wine versus spiced cider. He handed me a newspaper clipping he thought I'd like, an op-ed about women building without permission. I tucked it into my purse and made a mental note to read it before bed. Back at home, I typed notes for a proposal I'd been thinking about quietly for years. A foundation in my name for first-generation women entering STEM fields. Not splashy, not performative, just real help behind the scenes, where I like to live. I didn't announce it, I didn't post it, but I built it. And I funded it with the same resources they once called extra money when they thought I'd never say no. On my desk, I kept the photo from the summit. Just one image, no caption, no digital proof. Just me, arms open, explaining something too complex for the people who had always seen me as the one with no voice. As I walked past the mirror near the entryway, I caught my reflection. No filter, no shame. Not younger, not broken. Just here. Forgiveness isn't the door I walked through, I whispered aloud, barely moving my lips. But I found the window, and I opened it,